the presence of a quorum, and so now I'll call this business meeting to order. For the information of the members of the committee, Ranking Member Whitehouse and I will deliver our opening statements, and once we have sufficient attendance, we will vote on the pending nominee. After the roll call vote, members who wish to be recognized to speak on the nomination may do so. So I want to thank my colleagues for attending today's business meeting, and today we are considering the nomination of Jeffrey Hall to lead the EPA Office of Enforcement and Compliance Assurance, or OECA. Mr. Hall has experience as a litigator, prosecutor, and legal advisor to the Department of Justice and in private practice, providing him with a broad understanding of the enforcement needs and challenges facing the government. OECA is charged with enforcing the most serious water, air, and chemical pollution violations under the Clean Water Act, the Clean Air Act, CERCLA, and the Toxic Substance Control Act. The office also must work with EPA regional offices in partnership with state governments, tribal governments, and other federal agencies to promote regulatory compliance and enforce the nation's environmental laws and regulations. The previous administration placed an outsized emphasis on penalizing regulated entities rather than working with them to ensure compliance. OECA needs to strike a balance between encouraging and achieving regulated entities' compliance with our environmental laws and prioritizing criminal or civil penalty enforcement where it will address serious violations of law to best protect our environmental resources. Mr. Hall's understanding of both sides of the enforcement and compliance question, as demonstrated by his experience and testimony before the committee, make him well qualified to lead OECA. I urge my colleagues to support his nomination, and I will now turn to Ranking Member Whitehouse for his opening statement.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. You will not be surprised that I take a very different view. Jeffrey Hall, Trump's nominee for Assistant Administrator of EPA's Office of Enforcement and Compliance Assurance, is yet another industry crony, more interested in serving big polluters than in serving the public. Mr. Hall's experience in environmental law is limited to a few months at DOJ's Environment and Natural Resources Division and 2 years at a Trump-aligned firm working to undercut the Clean Air Act. So why hire him? From mid-February 2025, when he entered the building, to mid-March, Mr. Hall's greatest hits included dismissing a Clean Air Act lawsuit days before trial against a Cancer Alley chemical plant located next to an elementary school, a directive to scale back enforcement that might, quote, unduly burden, close quote, fossil fuel, including all enforcement against methane pollution, including the big methane leakers who are so bad they don't even meet their own industry leak standards, and adding political reviews to energy-related, i.e. fossil fuel-related matters. In June, EPA dismissed an administrative complaint with prejudice, so they cannot bring it again, against Trump megadonor and former Pam Bondi employer, Geo Group. The complaint alleged misuse of pesticides at a detention facility where a separate lawsuit alleges prison guards sprayed the chemicals directly on inmates. When asked in his confirmation about this abrupt dismissal, Hall, who oversaw the office, claimed no involvement and insisted career personnel made the decision. Then admitted in his QFRs that he was briefed on the matter in May and knew of likely additional violations. Trump issued an executive order discouraging all criminal regulatory enforcement, a free pass for, say, falsifying pollution data, or engaging in dangerous behavior that causes death, as in the Deepwater Horizon explosion and oil spill. On the civil side, DOJ has filed fewer enforcement complaints in the first 6 months of an administration on EPA's behalf than in any previous administration. Helping polluters more, EPA's enforcement attorneys were offered a targeted buyout in August, a move Hall did not contest because he said a smaller staff can deliver what he calls appropriate enforcement. Appropriate for polluters, I'd say. Republicans stalled President Biden's OECA nominee for 2 years and now rush to install someone who sees his job to, quote, advance American energy dominance. That's Trump speak for fossil fuel polluters. Once upon a time, Republicans used to be against amnesty, for law and order, and against government picking winners and losers. Now polluters are getting their agents on the inside to dismantle proper enforcement. I'm not going to be a part of this. I will vote no on Mr. Hall and urge my colleagues to do the same.
Thank you. Does anybody wish to talk on the nominee while we're waiting to fill out the dais here? So we'll hold for just a minute then. I realize everybody has other committees that are requiring roll call votes as well, but as you know, the rules of the committee, we need to have, I think particularly in this vote, which is probably going to be pretty much party line vote, probably will be, we are waiting for one senator, so let's just hold another couple minutes. If she doesn't come, we'll come with another strategy. All right, if I could have everybody's attention, I think 25 minutes is pretty long. So what I'm going to do is adjourn the business meeting and then hopefully recess the business meeting so that we can hopefully meet off the floor during the 11 o'clock votes. We will inform your staff as to when and where. And I would ask the witnesses to go ahead and move forward for the second portion. My apologies to all of us who were in the room. I appreciate it. Really?
Well done, Lindsay. You did a great job, man.
Leader, what a leader. All right, here we go. I am calling this hearing to order and welcome our witnesses. Thank you so much. Apologize for the delay. I also want to congratulate Adam Tell on his recent confirmation. Hanging by a thread there, Adam, until the very end, but you made it across the finish line in our final vote in August. Today, we will conduct oversight of the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers Civil Works Program and examine the agency's implementation of the prior Water Resources Development Acts. Since 2014, this committee has kept to a biannual schedule of passing this bipartisan legislation and look forward to keeping on track with that record. WRDA authorizes water resource studies and projects and sets national priorities for our Civil Works program. The Corps does critical work across the nation through its navigation, flood risk management, and ecosystem restoration missions. This work protects the lives and livelihoods of millions of West Americans and facilitates commerce throughout our country and internationally. So the timely implementation of these laws consistent with congressional intent is essential. The Corps is actively working on a number of studies and projects that I'm going to mention because they're critically important to my state of West Virginia. The Lower Mud River Flood Risk Management Project in Milton, West Virginia has been a priority of mine. In WRDA 2022, I was able to increase the federal share of that project from 65% to 90%. This change brought in the support we needed without creating financial strain on our state. In 2023, I also secured another $190 million for this project, bringing the total to $287 million in federal funding, delivering on the federal side of the funding equation to make this project happen. Last month, West Virginia signed an amendment to the project partnership agreement to formalize the new cost-sharing agreement, which allows the project to resume. Secretary Tell, thank you for being there. I know that was your first visit in your new official position, and I thank you for joining us in Milton for that ceremony. The state of West Virginia recently committed to matching the federal funds that I have secured for the Upper Wyandotte and Kanawha River Basin flood risk management studies. Just over 9 years ago, in June of 2016, West Virginia experienced flooding at historic rates, leading to tragic deaths and devastation. The Kanawha River Basin is a direct response to this flooding. I championed a provision in WRDA 2024 that increases the federal cost share for future projects identified by this study. WRDA 2024 also increased the ability for the Corps to carry out smaller projects for debris and obstruction removal, which is critical to reducing the severity of flooding in many areas of, I'm sure, everybody's state, particularly ours. The fifth and final phase of the Bluestone Dam Safety Assurance Mega Project in the city of Hinton continues to make significant progress. In September of 2024, Hurricane Helene led to high water levels in rivers and streams across the East Coast, well beyond the areas hit directly by the storm. The New River was among those affected and resulted in historic water levels against the Bluestone Dam. The dam was able to withstand the rising waters and prevented an estimated $577 million in damages. Once completed, the project will protect more than 150,000 people and $20 billion worth of infrastructure. Unfortunately, there's more to be done. This year alone, several parts of West Virginia experienced devastating flooding. In February, flooding in McDowell County resulted in the loss of lives and necessitated major rescue and recovery efforts. The damage wiped out the only route to the Welch Community Hospital and caused major infrastructure issues in Wyoming and Mingo County. Ohio and Marion counties also experienced significant damage and loss of lives following flash flooding on the Father's Day weekend. My congressional colleagues and I supported Governor Morrissey's request for presidential disaster declarations, and I'm grateful to President Trump for his approval of these requests. I will continue to work with the Corps and local government officials to determine if additional authorities are needed to help mitigate the impacts from future flood events. Thank you again for the witnesses to be here, and I now turn to my ranking member Whitehouse, for his opening statement.
Thank you, Chairman, for this hearing today. Thank you, Assistant Secretary Tell and Lieutenant General Graham, for appearing. As you know, one of my most vexing problems, one the Corps has refused to remedy, is chronic underfunding of coastal storm risk management projects. For my ocean state, that's a bad situation. With flood risk on the rise nationwide, coastal areas face the most severe increases due to rising sea levels and more frequent extreme rainfall events. In First Street's National Flood Risk Assessment, coastal cities outrank inland cities by all measures of substantial flood risk. The Nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office has determined that the share of properties exposed to flood risk in coastal communities is more than twice that of inland communities. And coastal communities are projected to see even sharper increases in flood risk over the next 2 decades. Greater flood and storm risks are, in turn, contributing to a property insurance crisis that threatens to trash our entire economy. When risk makes property uninsurable, the property also becomes unmortgageable. Without mortgages, property markets crash. And as we all saw in 2008, when property markets crash, so does the economy. Despite this dire situation, coastal storm risk management projects year after year receive between 20 and 100 times less funding than inland flood risk management projects. That simply isn't good enough. The Corps needs to tackle problems like this one head-on and embrace reform. Assistant Secretary Tell, I supported your nomination and confirmation because I know you understand and appreciate the critical role that congressional oversight plays in ensuring that federal agencies deliver for people. I value your commitment to maintaining an open line of communication with Senator Capito and me, and particularly appreciate your willingness to engage with committee staff on a regular basis to keep the Corps accountable. In prior testimony before this committee, you spoke of your formative experience helping to secure funding and resources for the state of Mississippi's recovery from devastating effects of Hurricane Katrina. And you know from experience managing the FEMA portfolio for the Senate Homeland Security and Government Affairs Committee that disasters do not differentiate between red and blue states. Under your leadership, I expect to remove the political bias so blatant in the Corps' fiscal year 2025 construction work plan, which shifted over $250 million in construction funding from blue states to red states, completely eliminating funding for 4 critical California flood risk management projects to fund navigation projects in Texas that did not even make the cut in the Corps' fiscal year 2025 budget. Assistant Secretary Tell, I expect you to put an end to that. Egregious partisanship does not serve the Army Corps, and it does not serve the American people. I also expect to see progress on project delivery. Cost escalations and delays are pervasive, recurring issues in the Corps' Civil Works construction program. The Trump administration's attacks on the federal workforce have only made these problems worse. In just a few months, people call it Doge, I call it Doggy. Doggy's deferred resignation program and voluntary early retirement have hollowed out Corps offices so that across the agency, workforce reductions undermine mission execution. Some Corps district offices have lost as much as 20% of their staff, and all have likely lost expert personnel. The prolonged Trump hiring freeze is exacerbating the staffing shortage. As a result of this doggy-driven chaos, Corps offices are either deferring work, contracting it out at a higher cost, or paying employees overtime to complete it, all while continuing to pay salaries to employees who, under the DRP, no longer report for duty. This is not just a matter of workforce morale. The DRP has actually jeopardized mission-critical operations and increased project cost. Assistant Secretary Tell, General Graham, you have your work cut out for you. I look forward to working with you and hope that you will acknowledge the challenges, roll up your sleeves, and work cooperatively with this committee to address them. Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Our first witness is the 14th Assistant Secretary of the Army for Civil Works, Adam Tell. Secretary Tell, as I mentioned in my opening statement, was recently confirmed to serve in this role by the Senate in a bipartisan vote. Prior to his confirmation, Mr. Tell spent 2 decades in public service with roles in the U.S. Senate, notably as my clerk for the Homeland Security Subcommittee and as a special assistant to the President in the first Trump administration. Welcome, Secretary Tell. Again, thank you for visiting West Virginia, and you are recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman Capito. Chairman Capito, Ranking Member Whitehouse, and distinguished members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to be here today to discuss the Army Civil Works Program. I am honored to serve as the 14th Assistant Secretary of the Army for Civil Works, and as President Trump's, Secretary Hegseth's, and Secretary Driscoll's top official responsible for overseeing the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers Civil Works mission. I was nominated by President Trump on March 24th of this year. I appeared in a hearing in May, and I was confirmed by the Senate, as Chairman Capito pointed out, on August 2nd. I began work in this role immediately thereafter and have been on the job for 6.5 weeks. During this time, I've been working alongside General Graham and his team to ensure that the Army Civil Works Program is positioned to deliver on President Trump's vision for our country and on its critical mission, which this committee has had an important role in defining. As I said during the consideration of my nomination before this committee, I'm honored to help lead the Army Civil Works mission. It touches small and large communities throughout the country, and very few government agencies' missions capture the interests of American citizens, landowners, communities, states, job creators, and their representatives here in Washington, quite like this one. The U.S. Army Corps of Engineers originated in 1775, before the Declaration of Independence was even signed. The America we know today developed in large part as a result of the work of the Corps. Congress has given the Corps 2 main missions in addition to its original navigation mission: flood damage reduction and ensuring the future availability of our aquatic resources. Because the Civil Works Program is important to the American public and their elected representatives here in Washington, during my first weeks, I've been working to establish greater consistency and accountability across the 4 layers of this enterprise, which consists of my office and the Corps' headquarters, divisions, and districts. I intend to spend my time in this job ensuring that the Corps carries out its missions to benefit the American public as effectively, as quickly, and as efficiently as possible. We must optimize our program for quality, speed, and cost if we want to do our part to protect lives and commerce, as President Trump is delivering on his vision to ensure that the United States remains the greatest nation in the history of the world during the 21st century. Our partners here on Capitol Hill, and particularly on this committee, have been pivotal in supporting this enterprise, and I request your partnership as I work with General Graham to ensure the Civil Works Program evolves to become more efficient and consistent to meet our modern demands. To deliver against that workload, we must work in partnership with the Congress, throughout the executive branch, and with our stakeholders to drive efficiency, collaboration, and results in an environment that is necessarily resource constrained. In addition to driving more efficiency into the Civil Works Program, we must continue to lift the federal regulatory burden on the public. This administration is committed to ending the last 5 decades of confusing and ever-changing definitions of the term waters of the United States under the Clean Water Act of 1972. Together with Administrator Zeldin and President Trump's Environmental Protection Agency, the Army has already issued guidance that follows the Supreme Court's Sackett decision. And we will move quickly to issue a permanent definition that follows the post-Sackett law of the land, reduces red tape, cuts overall permitting costs, lowers the cost of doing business in communities across the country, and continues to protect America's navigable waters. In July, my office made much-needed changes to our National Environmental Policy Act implementing procedures that will reform, modernize, and expedite the Corps' environmental reviews, eliminate unnecessary delays, and help ensure the growth of highly cost-effective, reliable infrastructure projects across the nation. We also recognize the opportunities and benefits provided to this program through WRDA 2024 and previous WRDAs, which this committee has had such an important role in shaping. These efforts were intended to address navigation, reservoir management, the beneficial use of dredge material, and many other issues. I look forward to gaining insight today about your views and interests so that together we can serve America's vital infrastructure needs. Thank you, Chairman Capito, Ranking Member Whitehouse, and the members of this committee. I look forward to answering any questions you may have.
Stop bombing Papua. The U.S. military needs to stop desecrating Hawaiian lands, to stop desecrating Hawaiian waters, clean up and Get out of it!
Thank you, Secretary Tell. Appreciate that opening statement. Next, we will hear from Lieutenant General William H. Graham, Jr., the 56th Chief of Engineers and Commanding General of the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. General Graham assumed these duties last September after serving as the Corps' Deputy Commanding General for civil and emergency operations. As Commanding General, he is responsible for over 30,000 civilian employees and 800 military personnel in more than 110 countries. General Graham, really, welcome. Thank you for serving. Thank you for being here, and we look forward to your opening statement.
Chairman Capito, Ranking Member Whitehouse, members of the committee, I'm very honored to testify before you today in regard to oversight of the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers Civil Works Program and the implementation of the Water Resources Development Acts. Through the Civil Works Program, the Army Corps works with our partners to study, build, and operate water resource projects focusing on our three main mission areas of commercial navigation, flood and storm damage reduction, and aquatic ecosystem restoration. Let me break those down. The navigation program, which consists of our coastal and Great Lakes channels, as well as the inland rivers and intercoastal waterways, underpins much of the national economy, ensuring that commodities can move reliably and efficiently. Our flood and storm damage reduction program maintains 746 dams, over 13,000 miles of federal levees, and 450 miles of shore protection. Those systems provide, on average, a staggering $200 billion per year of flood damages avoided. To continuously maintain and improve these mission areas, I certainly want to thank this committee, as was mentioned by the chairman, for supporting the Corps Civil Works Program with your commitments since 2014 to passing biennial Water Resources Development Acts. Those acts have provided us with the authorities necessary to address the changing needs of the nation's water resources infrastructure. WRDA 24 advanced the Corps' principal civil works missions by authorizing new navigation, flood risk management, coastal storm risk management, and aquatic ecosystem restoration studies and projects all across the country. These studies and projects, when funded, will strengthen the supply chain, better protect Americans from flooding, and improve degraded aquatic environments. We deeply value the authorities you have entrusted to us. Our pledge is to put them to work to deliver for the American people. To that end, the Army Corps' objective every day is to safely deliver quality projects on schedule within budget. We measure this closely, our scheduled delivery. Our current on-schedule rate, when I checked this morning, was 80.4%. That's a low, low, low B, and that's unacceptable. This performance is influenced by factors we can control and factors such as inflation that we don't control. So focusing on those things that we can control, the Army Corps is absolutely committed to procedural improvements, as Mr. Tell spoke about, in the following three areas. First, we've got to get the engineering right. The focus here is on the maturity of the designs. We will not request authority to build new projects unless the design is advanced enough that we truly understand what we're proposing to build. That threshold is usually around the 35% level. We have not been doing that in the past. There are some nuances on how we need to work to break down large, complex projects, and there are some nuances on cost sharing of studies versus cost sharing of construction. And we are committed to working through those nuances with this committee. But fundamentally, we need to better understand what it is we're proposing to build before we ask you for authority to build it. The second thing, we've got to get the project management right. Here we're focusing on crafting logical, fully resourced schedules and sticking to them, ensuring that we're delivering these important projects with a great sense of urgency, or as General Kelly puts it, hustle. If we stay on schedule, then we're likely to stay on budget. Third thing, we've got to get the team right. We're striving to bring together the right mix of talent with either onboard manning or leveraging the incredible talents in the private sector. So in closing, the path to successful delivery is clear. Plan projects thoroughly, fund them efficiently, and build them rapidly with the right team of master builders. We look forward to working with this committee to stay on that path. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today, and I look forward to addressing your questions.
Thank you, General. Appreciate it. So I'll kick us off for the first question for Secretary Tell. Many provisions provided in prior WRDAs have gone largely unimplemented. Section 1102 of WRDA 24 requires that your office develop and submit a plan to Congress on the implementation of not just WRDA 2024, but prior WRDAs. This plan must identify provisions that will require implementation guidance or appropriations. So my first question is, when can we expect the list of WRDA 2024 provisions to be finalized?
Senator Capito, thank you for the question, Chairman Capito. My office, and I know General Graham's, under his leadership of the Corps of Engineers, takes very seriously the work of this committee. I'm committed to following the provisions in WRDA, following the law. This committee has expressed frustration over the speed of implementation of the laws that you have enacted. And as you point out, Chairman Capito, we owe you a plan about how to get that done. Each of these provisions is different. I believe the number in the WRDA 2024 was approximately 180 plus provisions that we are working to implement. Some of them are straightforward and easy to implement. Some of them require implementation guidance, as you point out. And we have made determinations about which are straightforward enough to implement and which require implementation guidance. And I will just say that it would be helpful to work with you to identify provisions that we can address without triggering a large interagency process. If we can get the information to you that you need to do your job, we'll be happy to work with you on doing that.
So I'm asking if you have a date of when you would put your plan forward with all this implementation. My understanding is in 2024, we required you to submit to us a plan, correct?
Yes, ma'am, that is correct.
Do you have a date when you'll have that to us?
Senator, I'm not prepared to give you a specific date today. All I can tell you is that in the
Is that because it's 180 provisions and some are more complicated than others, or is it because, why is that?
Senator, at the heart of it is that the Article 2 branch of government is led by a chief executive, and many of the provisions included in WRDA 2024 implicate agencies and equities across the government. And in order to speak with one executive branch voice and give you an answer that's correct, it necessarily involves coordination with a myriad of agencies that complicates our ability to get you the information you need so that we can speak with one executive branch voice. And so, and given that that provision implicates a number of provisions that implicate other agencies, it is complex for us to deliver to you something that you can count on that is right, but I'm committed to doing that.
Well, that's important, I think, obviously, for us to have it included in that WRDA 2024. That plan is important to us. General Graham, on the cost overrun issues, this is just a consistently huge issue. We included several provisions intended to provide the Corps with more time and resources to better study possible solutions, the needs that might be on the front end, and you sort of mentioned this. Our intent was for the agency to then spend less time reworking project plans after they have been authorized for construction. However, we do not want these provisions to be interpreted as a directive from Congress to the Corps to go back to the days when the agency spent years or decades studying a single project. What additional steps are being taken to address these cost overruns? You addressed this a little bit in your open statement, but if you could get a deeper dive on that.
Chairman Capito, and thank you for that question. Every time we don't deliver a project on schedule, I get an email from the district engineer who explains what happened, and then we have some very pointed discussions on what was the root cause. And a vast majority of the root causes are we didn't know enough, as I spoke to in my opening statement, about the project before we asked you to authorize it. Probably a good way to visualize that is a lot of those authorizations were kind of at the conceptual 10% level. They weren't at the 35%. So basically, hey, we authorized a house, not a 4-bedroom house with a gas heater and 3 bedrooms. And that is what is tripping us up. Digging down into the details a little bit more, the main thing we missed is the field investigations. So we didn't get all the survey data that we need. So we didn't know this is a water resource business we're in, so that those elevations, those are kind of critical. And same thing goes with, well, what property is associated with those surveys? What does the soil look like that we're going to build upon? Kind of fundamental stuff. And we didn't do nearly enough of that. So we're working with Secretary Tell to come up with a common sense reason or explanation or work rationale for moving this forward.
Just, my time's running out here, but I would just ask, do you envision then going back on pending projects and redoing this? Or is this from going forward, this is the way you're going to do it on new projects?
So certainly going forward.
Right.
But for the projects that have been authorized, but we haven't built those yet.
Right.
The designs on those are still sitting probably around the 10% level. So it'd be
Yeah.
helpful to be able to open those up, take a look at those. And then when Congress and the administration are looking to fund those projects, I can give you a realistic cost estimate.
Okay, all right. Senator Whitehouse.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Gentlemen, thank you both for being here. My coastal risk management concern is exemplified in the President's fiscal year 2026 budget, which has $1.56 billion for the core construction account, with only $2 million recommended for coastal storm risk management. I've talked about a 20-to-1 ratio. I've talked about a 100-to-1 ratio. This is an 80-to-1 ratio. And if you drill down on that one, on the $2 million, you find that it actually won't even fund a single project. It's for employee compensation claims to the Department of Labor. So that, to me, nets out to 0 coastal storm risk management projects in the fiscal year 2026 budget. What are we going to do about this?
Senator Whitehouse, you and I have discussed this previously on several occasions, and it's something that I've looked into in my 6.5 weeks here on the job. You and I should compare numbers. The numbers I have for FY26 President's budget are different than yours, and I just want to make sure that we're speaking from the same facts. What I will say about the overall ratio that you,
Just
go ahead, sir.
quick, give me the name of the person on your team my team should talk to go through the numbers before we have to have this conversation.
Absolutely. Your team works very closely with Stacey Brown.
Stacey Brown it is. Go ahead.
Senator Whitehouse, one of the things that I wanted to point out to you in looking through these numbers is that the vast majority of construction and investigations funding goes towards rehabilitating our dams. These are dams that were built over the decades that protect American cities from flood risk. They hold water back from flooding those cities. A large portion of the President's budget request is related to maintaining and rehabilitating those dams that are of a critical safety level. When you look at the new projects that are not dam-related in investigations and construction, the ratio that you're discussing is more like 1.7 to 1 inland to coastal. And so I just want to point out that when we're taking action to rehabilitate infrastructure that is in desperate need of it based on the safety implications, the President's budget has prioritized those activities, and it does skew the numbers, but I want to make sure that you understand those aren't new dams. Those are dams that are in our inventory and have been for, in many cases, decades.
Yeah. And were it not for this discrepancy, there'd probably be a lot of coastal projects that would have been in your inventory for decades, but because they were overlooked, they're not in your inventory for decades. So it's a continuing problem, and I look forward to working with you to find a sensible solution.
Thank you, sir.
You've indicated that you are pausing work on feasibility studies for non-structural solutions. That is Army Corps speak for what? Non-structural.
Senator, thank you for asking the question. And then I think in the case that you're discussing, non-structural refers to an activity that is not in keeping with the Corps' long tradition of building infrastructure that protects entire communities, but rather going home by home and in many cases flood-proofing.
Elevating homes would be a perfect example of that.
Correct. And I would say at scale is a key part of this conversation, because we're not talking about a project where, we provide some piece of flood control infrastructure and then for the few homes that are still in harm's way, we elevate them. We're talking about going into entire regions and using the United States Army Corps of Engineers to go and home by home elevate. And I think, as I discussed with you yesterday, I think this, based on the initial results of some of this work at scale, we need to have a conversation about whether this is how you would like for the United States Army Corps of Engineers to dedicate its efforts.
Well, first of all, let me say that I'm eager for that discussion, and I think there are other interests that can be brought to bear having to do with the National Flood Insurance Program. There's a lot of messy work that has not been done about protecting our coasts, and it's not clear that you coming in and doing all of it is the best solution. But neither is it the best solution to have you just walk away. And I have the example here of Louisiana's large-scale non-structural project of $600 million to raise 3,462 homes across a 4,700 square mile study area, which is a pretty big project, and $600 million is pretty serious money even for the Army Corps. But if you put that next to the Ike Dike in Texas, the budget for that is about closing on $60 billion. So it's 100 times more expensive to do the Ike Dike project. You could do 100 of those Louisiana projects, and I think in that context, it's important that we come to a sensible, common sense solution and not one that just says, okay, non-structural is all done here.
Senator, I agree with you, and I want to make very clear, General Graham's team's directive to take a harder look at the non-structural program has not slowed work on the two pilot projects in Louisiana and New York, the one that you referenced. However, it has, I would just say that the early results that I've been made aware of that program would cause the cost to escalate far beyond the $600 million amount that you referenced. And quite frankly, I believe if we didn't take a second look at this, we would be being called before this committee for waste, not inefficiently using taxpayer dollars. And so I think your willingness to work with us to get this right, we don't want to walk away from non-structural solutions, and we'll always analyze them as alternatives. The question is whether the United States Army Corps of Engineers is the appropriate entity to implement them.
I think I can safely say that both the chair and I would like to work with you to get to a sensible solution that is not no more non-structural. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks. Senator Kramer.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Thank you to our witnesses, to both of you. Let me start out, Mr. Assistant Secretary, by thanking you. You know, we're in 2024 when we passed the bill that, or the law that required the Army to form the Western Water Cooperation Committee. I had 2+ years of stalling. Oh, by the way, it was due in 90 days after we passed it, or after it was implemented. You stepped in and it got done, and I appreciate that, because that's part of what we're talking about. Many of the things we're talking about don't require, with all due respect, a brand-new elevation report. The land has been the same for a long, long time, and there's a lot of stuff we know. But just forming a committee, thank you for doing that. It means a lot to me that you stepped up and did that. And on the topic we've discussed a little bit, generally speaking, the administration has embraced doing more with less, being more efficient with the people's money, not just throwing personnel and dollars after every challenge as though somehow that's going to magically fix things. It's a breath of fresh air, and I'm fully supportive of it. In the past, especially with the Corps, something we've heard a lot is we just don't have enough staff to do things. So we give them a whole bunch more staff, and so that means more lawyers get to read the same thing over and over. More engineers get to look at the same thing over and over and stall longer for, with regard to the law. And I think the smarter approach is streamlining things and eliminating unneeded regulations and ultimately reducing the workload, and not just the workforce, but your workload. Specifically, Mr. Secretary, with regard to the Corps, do you believe that pre-COVID staffing levels are adequate to deliver a lot of the things you're hearing about today and the task in front of you?
Senator Kramer, thank you for the question, and thank you for working with us on the Western Water Committee. I agree with you that a larger bureaucracy doesn't necessarily mean better results for the American taxpayer. And as you intelligently point out, the staffing levels within the United States Army Corps of Engineers mirror the staffing levels of the United States Army Corps of Engineers prior to the pandemic. I believe that with modern technology, with better forms of cooperation with our non-federal sponsors, I think about the project in Fargo in your state, I think we can deliver more to the American taxpayers with a staff that looks a whole lot like the staff prior to the pandemic. And so thank you for addressing that. I think the answer to your question
Thank
is
you
yes.
for addressing it. Like I said, let's reduce the workload along with the workforce, because it seems to me there's a lot of redundancy. In fact, I mean, just listening to the discussion a little bit ago, well, throughout the morning, I find it frustrating that years go by. I mean, with regard to just one example in North Dakota, noxious weeds. We're to 2020, over 5 years ago, I passed a law that requires a report on how to deal with noxious weeds. I hear it over and over from landowners that border core land. It's over 3 years late, the report. In other words, they're never going to do it. I'm sure it's in some well-intentioned bureaucrat's pile. But the law didn't say, get around to it when you can. And what I was going to say about the nuance of things. When in doubt, obey the law. It's not, I don't call my wife if I get picked up for speeding to see what I should do about it. I slow down. Our laws are not arbitrary. They're not open-ended to just, do your best. So a report on noxious weeds, and noxious weeds is a good example. I'm glad you brought up technology, because the farmers that farm the land right next to core land know exactly how to do it. You could just have a cup of coffee with the guy next door, and they tell you exactly how to get rid of the noxious weeds in a safe manner. Because guess what? The farmers make a living off that land. They're not even just doing it because, the government told them they should. They're doing it because they have to feed a hungry world, and they know how to do it. So let's default to yes, and that's what I appreciate about you, Mr. Secretary. You default to what's possible. How do we do the possible? Okay, that's the law. How creative can we get within the law to get to yes? And the default at the core for decades has been, no, we can't do that, even though the law says you have to do that. So maybe I'll just, General, if you want to speak a minute or two about the noxious weed issue. I don't know how familiar you are with it, but really it's now over 3 years late, that report. And why is that?
Senator Kramer, I believe that report, as you kind of alluded to, is still under administration review, but we absolutely want to be great neighbors with our partners up there and leverage every bit of local knowledge that we have with the farmers out there, with the tribes out there, so that we can steward this land for the American people to the best of our ability.
Okay, good. Well, let's just give more of it back to the tribes and the farmers, and they can steward it really, really well.
Senator Merkley.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you both for your partnership on so many important infrastructure questions or challenges in the West. In Coos Bay, the stakeholders are working to establish the first ship-to-rail container port on the U.S. West Coast, and you all have been serving as the point for the permitting process for the channel modification and for coordinating with other federal agencies on upgrading the terminal and modernizing the railroad line. This is an incredible opportunity to add to our ability to move freight in a cost-effective fashion that keeps trucks off the road and enables us in a growing interdependent world to get products to market, supply chains to be effective. And so I appreciate that very much, and I appreciate your operation and efforts on the hatcheries. When the dams were built, there was a promise made that these dams will be accompanied by efforts to make sure the fish runs continue. Those kind of go close to our heart and our soul in the West, so incredibly important. And of course, the dredging projects that involve various ports. So 3 questions that I'm going to get to here, a minute apiece, so it'll be kind of rapid fire. But first, it's been 3 years since I met with the Corps down at the Coal Rivers hatchery, and it became very clear that the biggest challenge there was the supply of clean water, and basically the answer was we need a pipeline that goes further up the river to bring in cleaner water, we need a better filtration system, and this hatchery supplies not only to the fish runs on the Rogue, but also on the Umpqua, also a whole series of lakes in terms of trout, incredibly important. In those 3 years, we've gotten an electric line and 6 rows. To me, that's a 1-year project. Meanwhile, we're nowhere close to getting the water supply, which is the critical, essential heart of the hatchery challenge, because they've had a number of losses of different groups of fish as a result of contaminated water. How can we expedite the completion of the renovation of this essential hatchery?
Senator Merkley, thank you for the question and understanding the rapid-fire request. I would just say we agree with you completely on the need to increase our U.S. port capacity for competitiveness in the 21st century. With regard to the fish hatchery questions that you raised, I will defer to General Graham on the details of the progress there, but I would just say that in my review of this issue, it's clear that there are a number of equities implicated, including hydropower and other interests in your state. And so I would just defer to General Graham on the complicated nature of this challenge.
So, Senator Merkley, again, thank you for that question. And we understand the challenges at Coal River. The design for that water treatment improvements that you spoke to is at 85%, as I checked yesterday. And the additional substation electrical work, the funding is on hand to do that for a 26 award. But when I talked to the Portland District about all of the fish hatcheries that we own, that others run, they're all, if I had to give them a letter grade, they are all about a C minus, D plus. And so the direction I gave the division command out there is we need to come up with a long-term capital reinvestment strategy in those hatcheries.
Thank you, and I'll just keep pressing, because this was the deal on the dams, that the hatcheries would be a very effective complementary component. And watching them deteriorate and in many places be unable to fulfill the responsibilities that they have is extremely disturbing. And it's not just an environmental issue, it's an economic issue for our commercial fisheries, for our sports fisheries, but just for our whole connection to the ecosystem in the West. So I'll keep pressing, and thank you. I just don't think it should take years to do new roofs and an electrical cable, and it shouldn't take forever to design, redesign. I mean, the 85% you refer to, the design work just seems to go on forever. And it's like one can always visit and revisit and revisit, is this the best design? But at some point you say, listen, this is a plan that enough people have looked at. Let's build the dam pipeline to get the water there. Let's put in a state-of-the-art filtration system and do it, and start spending the money on the implementation rather than one more design contract. That's my energy about this, my passion about this. There is a report that was required in WRDA 2022 on a deauthorization of hydropower in the Willamette Valley system. The Portland District and Northwest Division have completed the report, but it's sitting somewhere, and kind of echoes of my colleague across the aisle. Where is that report sitting? Is it sitting in OMB? Is it sitting at Army Corps headquarters? And it's very frustrating to see these reports completed and just nobody ever takes action to say, yeah, we'll actually issue it.
Senator Merkley, I'll take that one. It is important when we get you information that it speak for the entirety of the executive branch of government. With that said, I'm committed, and that may take longer than any of us would hope, but I'm committed to following the law and getting you the report that you referenced as quickly as we possibly can in coordination with our interagency partners.
Is it on headquarters desk, or is it on OMB desk?
Senator Merkley, I don't know with the particular report that you're referencing where it is within the interagency, but it is important that the entire executive branch have the ability to speak and give you the right answer based on all the information that is needed to gather across the interagency, and we've got to be better at delivering that.
You'll give me an answer, though?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. I'm over time, so just one sentence, if the chair will bear with me. You don't have to respond. I'll follow up. But WRDA 2020 established provisions for a 15% set-aside of the Harbor Maintenance Trust Fund for emerging ports, of which we have 14 on the Oregon coast. That guidance that was required from 2020 has never been released. Let's get it released. Let's get that 15% doing the job that Congress said it's supposed to be doing. Thanks.
Thank you. Before I call on Senator Ricketts, I want to announce that we are going to do our business meeting that was previously recessed. We'll reconvene at 11:45 in the President's room off of the Senate floor. So with that, I'll go to Senator Ricketts.
Great. Thank you, Chairman Capito, and thank you, Ranking Member Whitehouse, for holding this important Oversight Committee meeting of the Army Corps of Engineers. Secretary Tell, great to see you again. Congratulations on your confirmation. Glad you're here in the job. General, glad to have you here as well, and look forward to working with you. I'm really pleased to be on this committee because the Army Corps serves an important function in my state. When I was governor in 2019, Nebraska and the Midwest experienced a devastating flood that had many of our rivers, but the Missouri River in particular. And 4 people lost their lives. Farmers lost $400 million in corn and soybeans. Ranchers lost $400 million in livestock. Federal authorities estimate the damage for Nebraska alone was $2.6 billion. I worked closely with the Corps to push for action. Together with the governors of Iowa, Kansas, and Missouri, I partnered with the Corps to launch a planning assistance to states study, which we actually helped finance. This effort brought the Corps, governors, and local stakeholders together to make better informed floodplain management decisions. At that time, the relationship with the Corps was rocky. Too often, Nebraskans' concerns were met with only explanations of why something couldn't be done, a refrain we've heard here earlier, and weren't getting done quickly or not at all. At times, I saw the Corps as more of an obstacle than a partner, and one that failed to put the people first in its decision-making. Today is a new opportunity, though, with Secretary Tell and Lieutenant General Graham leading the change. Yet, more than 6 years later, many issues remain. The $3 million 3-year planning assistance study has now taken more than 5 years and has cost more than $10 million. This is, again, a similar refrain from what we've heard other people, projects taking longer and costing more. And still, it hasn't changed how the Corps has conducted business. The study is yet to be finalized, but it's not clear there's going to be any concrete actionable steps in this plan for improvement. Another part of the challenge lies in the 2018 Master Manual, which governs the Corps' work on the Missouri River. The roots of the problem go back to 2004 when amendments to the 1979 manual reversed the Corps' historical flood control water management practices. That shift fundamentally scrambled the Corps' priorities for basin management. The amendment made environmental compliance equally as important as protection of human life and property through flood mitigation. The Corps must refocus its management on the river, on the agency's core values, which is water management for the benefit of those who rely on it for commerce and protecting people. Secretary Tell, do you believe that the 2018 Master Manual puts environmental compliance on the same level as protecting human life?
Senator, I will defer to Senator General Graham on questions about the manual and the specifics, but I will agree with your broader point, and it's one that we've heard many times already in this hearing, which is these projects cost too much and take too long. And I would just, I'm proud to report to you that under President Trump's leadership, the executive branch agencies that govern the issues that you raise are working to follow the law, to the letter of the law, not beyond what Congress intended with the law. There have been a number of actions taken with NEPA, with the definition of waters of the United States as rendered by the Sackett decision, as well as...
Secretary Tell, I've got limited time, so I appreciate that. General, are you familiar with the 2018 Master Manual?
Yes, Senator.
Do you believe that it puts environmental concerns at the same level as protecting human life?
No. We always put life, health, safety first of the 8 authorized purposes for the Missouri River.
Okay, great. Will you commit that you will continue to do that?
Absolutely.
Great, because that's what we need to have happening, because that's not been happening in the past. Can you tell me why the planning assistance study has taken more than 3 years and triple the cost to get done?
I can't specifically speak to that, but oftentimes those planning assistance to states are to provide a broad overview and to understand what's going on in those drainage basins. And then from there, they can take that information at the state, local, or even at the federal level and tear that off into additional studies. So we'll confirm with your staff what exactly else they needed to find out.
Great. Will you commit to getting us that report in a timely manner?
Absolutely.
Great, thank you. I've got just a few seconds left, but since Senator Merkley went over, I'm going to beg the chair for a little
all
indulgence.
yours.
Thank you. Really quickly here. Critical industries along the Missouri River must be able to have predictable flows on the Missouri River. Recently, the Corps' Northwest Division announced that Gavin's Point releases would be set at a minimum of 12,000 cubic feet per second from December 1st through February 2026, December 1st of this year through 2026. In 2023, when the river levels dropped low, two power station facilities in Salix, Iowa, were unable to generate power during an extremely cold stretch of time when we had very frigid temperatures. Secretary Tell, will you commit to prioritizing energy reliability when setting release levels at Gavin's Point so we can avoid the disruptions to power generation over the next couple of years?
Senator, absolutely. The Missouri River is one of the more complex rivers within the portfolio, and we have to balance all interests and all purposes, including flood risk mitigation, navigation, and as you point out, energy production.
Great, thanks. And General, what factors are considered in determining whether updates to the Missouri River Mainstream Reservoir System Master Water Control Manual are warranted?
Senator, specifically, we'll get back to your staff on what would trigger that, but broadly, it's large changes that we believe have happened in the watershed.
Great. We will follow up with you both. Thank you very much. Appreciate your time. Thank you, Madam Chair, for
Thank you.
giving me some time.
Senator Padilla.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you for the flexibility in our 5 minutes in advance. So I want to begin by
Be in
discussing.
a really good mood today, I don't know.
Want to begin by coming back to an item that, General, you spoke to in your opening comments, that of the proposed new 35% design standard required for feasibility study approval. Now, I understand the rationale behind the effort, but I do worry, and I think you share the concern, that larger projects will get stuck in a catch-22, where they can't move forward without significant more resources up front, while the Army Corps budget doesn't actually provide those necessary resources. So I worry that this could lead to a situation where the Army Corps simply stops doing any more big projects, and there's a number truly needed across the country, projects that are critical to protecting life and property of our constituents. We just celebrated the 20th anniversary, for lack of a better term, of Hurricane Katrina and the devastation to the people in Louisiana. I imagine a new standard like this would have delayed the project to restore the communities out there for years and years and years. I mean, that was a $14 billion levee repair. So, General Graham, for feasibility studies that lead to larger water resource projects costing more than $500 million, will the current annual budget for the investigations account support the level of design spending without causing multi-year delays? Or what's your idea or proposal on how to address that dynamic?
Senator Pia, thank you for that question. And whenever your senator gig kind of finishes up, we're hiring. We're always looking for some MIT mechanical engineers to join the team. So, sir, you know that the path to delivering quality projects on schedule within budget is to think through them carefully during this design phase, line up the funding, and then build them rapidly with a team of expert builders. And that's just what we have not been doing. We do need to figure out, with the investigations budget and the workload we have on very complex studies, how that would break out so that we can deliver those studies efficiently. For these large things, the Corps had been criticized in the past, many decades ago, for we weren't looking system-wide. We were looking at small projects scattered around. And so wisely, we were given direction from Congress and support from the administration to start looking at larger systems, and we've done that. Coastal Texas is a great example. Same thing with projects up in New York City. With that, we have to figure out a way to both break those down into manageable, implementable pieces, that we can advance the engineering far enough that we know what it is we're proposing you to build, and those also have to be budgetable. Now, $52 billion on $1.5 billion construction budget, that's probably going to be infeasible. So we've got to square both those circles.
Right, I understand. We have a little bit of a cosign too in California, by the way, not just Louisiana and New York. But you referenced in your opening remarks some nuances that are important to recognize. Would you consider any exceptions to the 35% design standard requirement for large projects? And look, there's future projects and there's projects that are sort of underway right now. Is there any grandfathering considered before this new standard is imposed?
Secretary Tell's guidance to us is make sure you're applying common sense as we're going through that analysis. And Senator, that's our commitment to you, is that we're going to apply common sense as we go through this. The goal being to deliver these projects as efficiently and effectively to protect your citizens and to make sure that our navigation interests, particularly like the Port of Long Beach, that amazing economic engine continues to run well.
Right, because there's ripple effects. All right, thank you for that. Definitely be doing some follow-up with you. Secretary Tell wanted to, before I ask you about the harbor maintenance tax conversation we had previously, just want to express my condolences on the loss of your father recently, and I appreciate your willingness to be here and continue the work during a difficult time. So please convey that with your family as well. Now, as you and I spoke during your confirmation process, the ports of Los Angeles and Long Beach are the busiest container. It's the busiest container port complex in the Western Hemisphere, and I appreciated the commitment you made at the time to this, not just to me, but to the committee, to uphold the donor and energy port funding as directed by WRDAs of 2020 and 2022. However, since your confirmation hearing and before you were sworn in, the administration released its fiscal year 25 work plan for the U.S. Army Corps, as well as the budget proposal for fiscal year 26. Neither document reflects the increased funding targets for donor and energy ports that Congress directed. So to put it mildly, that's troubling. Can you assure me and this committee that the WRDA 2020 set-aside of 12% of harbor maintenance trust fund obligations for donor and energy ports will be honored?
Senator Padilla, thank you for the question. We will follow the law. The FY25 work plan and the fiscal year 2026 President's budget include $58 million in keeping with that set aside and in keeping with the appropriations acts that have been enacted by Congress that govern those fiscal years.
So for my constituents watching from home, is that a yes or a no?
I'm just telling you that the FY25 work plan and the FY26 President's budget both include $58 million, which is consistent with the appropriations acts enacted by Congress.
But by my simple math, that doesn't add up to the 12% that we had previously discussed.
Senator, your math is correct.
And that Congress had directed.
Your math is correct, Senator. That is the level set by the appropriations acts for those fiscal years.
So it's not living up to the requirement. I understand the position that you're in, but we obviously have some work.
Senator,
to do here.
we follow the laws that are proposed by this committee and the Appropriations Committee.
All right. And Chairwoman's been more than generous with me. I'll do some follow-up questions for the record on the Pajaro Flood Protection Project and other important issues for my state. So thank you both very much.
Thank you. Senator Sullivan.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and Mr. Secretary, thank you for being here. General, thank you for being here. You both have a really, really critical job. I think one of the most important jobs in government. I think you're doing a great job, and I'm going to get to that on some of the things you've been doing in Alaska. I do want to remind you of the context. You've seen this chart before. This was the 70 executive orders that the Biden administration issued singularly, exclusively focused on Alaska, what we called the last frontier lockup. You look at, we have the actual list of them, the 7-0, right there. Those are executive orders and executive actions. No state got sanctioned more by their own federal government than we did in Alaska by the Biden administration. I like to do this in public a lot because those days are over, right? We have a new EO. That was the Alaska lockup. This is the Alaska comeback, and you're very familiar with this executive order. This is day one. The Trump administration issued an executive order called Unleashing Alaska's Extraordinary Resource Potential. We're the only state in the country that has our own EO. It was issued on the day of the president's inauguration. And the Corps of Engineers, as you know, Secretary Tell, is highlighted in that EO in a really big way. The part on the Assistant Secretary of the Army for Civil Works, now I'm reading the EO, shall immediately review, revise, rescind any agency action that may in any way hinder, slow, or otherwise delay any critical project in Alaska. And during your confirmation hearing, you remember what you said to me about that executive order in that paragraph in particular?
Senator Sullivan, I indicated to you that I had tattooed that paragraph of that executive order on my heart.
Yes, because you tattooed that on your heart. I have to admit, that was one of the best answers I've heard in a confirmation hearing in a long time. And you are doing that. So I very much appreciate that. Let me compliment you on the really important work that you did when we had another glacial lake outburst flood in Juneau, Alaska. Actually, this was the worst, but it wasn't as bad because the Corps of Engineers had acted quickly at my request this past spring on getting those HESCO barriers to help prevent flooding. But you also surged Brigadier General Getz to Alaska for a whole week and his team. They gave Juneau a lot of comfort. We got a lot of work to do, but can I get your commitment and, General, your commitment that we're not just going to study this. The people of Juneau are having flooding every summer. And by the way, last summer and this summer, it's amazing nobody's gotten killed. But we need to get on this soon. Can I get your commitment and any other updates you want to give me on that? But I appreciate you surging a high-level team for a week in Alaska to be in Juneau when this happened again. We need a Corps of Engineers solution to this, and I appreciate your focus on it.
Senator Sullivan, thank you for emphasizing the importance of this challenge. Your leadership helped guide our decision-making. And I've committed to you, let me also say, I'm just so proud of the United States Army Corps of Engineers, General Getz, his team, the Alaska District, for the work that they did in real time to save lives and property in Juneau, Alaska in mid-August. And I've committed to you, and General Graham has committed to me, that we are going to be focused on a long, medium, and short-term solution to address this challenge. The short-term solution is what you saw in August, and you're going to see it again as long as we need it while we're developing the medium and long-term solutions. And I will let General Graham comment on the progress on the medium and longer-term solutions.
Senator Sullivan, this is what we're built for. And being able to take a complex situation and work with our state and local partners to put a project in place rapidly. As you saw with General Getz up there, that's what we're committed to. So I know there's a smaller outburst happening kind of as we speak.
Yeah.
And we're working again with the city on, I think they held off on repairing some of the existing HESCO barriers until this finishes. The technical report that will lay the foundation for a long-term fix, we expect that next spring. And we'll watch that closely as that work unfolds. And that work that we're doing is going to be with all the partners who, across the government at all levels, has the ability to add to this solution. That's our commitment to you.
Great. I appreciate that. I know the people of Juneau really appreciate that, and it's so important. Madam Chair, can I, do I have opportunities?
Let me ask you a question. Have you voted on this?
I'm going to vote right after this one.
Okay.
Very quickly, just two more quick questions. Relating to this EO, I met with a company that's working on a really exciting project in Alaska. It's called Graphite One outside of Nome. But they are concerned that even though they were put on the docket, it's a graphite mine, one of the largest mine deposits in the world in Alaska, that they were put on Fast 41 as an EA, and we are hearing that the Alaska District is maybe putting them on as an EIS. Can you gentlemen take a look at that? That seems to go against the Trump executive order and maybe even more importantly, Sackett versus EPA, the recent Supreme Court case.
Senator, absolutely. This is something that we take very seriously, and I will just report to you that we have guidance in place now to implement Sackett on a temporary basis while we wait for a permanent rule to implement that Supreme Court decision. But I'll also tell you that through nationwide permits, which this committee has afforded the United States Army Corps of Engineers regional permits and good old-fashioned elbow grease, President Trump has delivered more than close to 800 permits for energy-related and resource-related activities, including approximately 10% of those in the state of Alaska in the first 9 months of his administration.
Thank you. Final question, very quick. Port of Nome. And I always put this chart up as well. A lot of action in Alaska. We have Russian and Chinese incursions into our airspace, Russian and Chinese incursions into our waters. 4 incursions just in August. And the Port of Nome is going to be critical for Alaska economic activity, but also for infrastructure for national security assets. The Corps awarded a nearly $400 million contract for Phase 1 of the Port of Nome expansion. This is a crucial step to establishing our infrastructure in the Arctic for our economy, but also for our national security. Can I get your commitment, gentlemen, to continue on beyond Phase 1, which is a huge phase? We're building the Port of Nome. We've been trying to get this done for 15 to 20 years. We're building it. Thanks to your leadership. $400 million contract awarded on Phase 1. But to continue that as a key issue for the Corps going forward, even beyond Phase 1. General, Mr. Secretary, can I get your commitment on that?
Senator, you absolutely have our commitment. We're also looking for more sources of rock up in Alaska that can bring the construction costs down, but you absolutely have our commitment to the Port of Nome.
Great.
Yes, sir,
Secretary?
Senator, of course.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Senator Alsobrooks.
Thank you so much to Madam Chair Capito and also Ranking Member Whitehouse for calling today's hearing. And I'd like to also say thank you so much to our witnesses for joining us. Mr. Secretary, in particular, I want to thank you for visiting Poplar Island in Maryland and seeing the important ecosystem restoration work that the Army Corps is doing in Maryland. And as you saw, the Army Corps' mission in Maryland is important and far-reaching, and the Corps is responsible for dredging near the Port of Baltimore, for undertaking large-scale ecosystem projects like Mid-Bay and Poplar Island, and for beach nourishment to protect our coastal communities. So I'm really glad that you had the opportunity. As you know, the Corps manages over 4,300 recreation areas across the nation, including one on the Maryland-West Virginia border. And these recreation areas support local economies and provide opportunities for boating, fishing, and hiking. In fact, nearly 212,000 boats are registered in Maryland, and boating remains one of the most popular recreational activities at Corps-managed sites nationwide. The administration's hiring freeze prevented the Corps from hiring seasonal staff who play an essential role in keeping these sites safe, open, and well-maintained. And without them, we saw closures, reduced hours, and limited services at recreation areas. Senator Kramer and I sent a letter urging the Corps to take immediate steps to exempt seasonal workers from the administration's hiring freeze, and I was glad to hear that the Secretary of the Army subsequently granted the Corps an exemption to hire up to 320 staff for Corps recreation areas. And so either of you can answer, but I wanted to check in, and maybe Mr. Secretary, you can start. How many of the 320 authorized seasonal employees was the Corps able to rehire?
Senator, thank you for raising this issue, and thank you for suggesting that I go see Poplar Island. It was enlightening, and I appreciate that suggestion. You're correct that we had a shortage of recreational workers heading into the spring, thanks to your work and Senator Kramer's work, and to the administration's very quick reaction to that. We were granted an exception to policy on hiring, and we have been working against that denominator that you referenced, approaching 100 employees that have been hired for recreation facilities. We expect that by next spring, that we will be at a point where we will not have any impacts or minimal impacts as it relates to the challenge we face this spring.
Thank you. Now, I also would like to know whether you expect, in the federal hiring freezes, do you expect it to affect the work of such as eco restoration, and what procedures have you put in place to monitor and assess the impact of workforce reductions on other authorized activities of the Civil Works program?
Senator, I'm not aware of any impacts on the Corps of Engineers' 3 core missions of flood risk mitigation, navigation, and aquatic ecosystem restoration.
Okay. Now, the Atlantic Coast of Maryland Shoreline Protection Project is a longstanding effort to protect Ocean City and nearby areas from coastal storm damage, flooding, and erosion. It's managed by the Army Corps, and the project includes engineered beaches and dune systems spanning nearly 7 miles over a 50-year period. Now, these systems have proven effective and have prevented about $927 million in storm-related damages since the 1900s in supporting our tourism economy. This project relies on periodic beach nourishment, with the next cycle originally scheduled for late 2025 to mid-2026. However, the replenishment has been delayed and is now not expected to begin until September of 2026, and wonder whether you could speak to the cause of this delay.
Senator Alsobrooks, thank you for raising this issue. You mentioned it in your opening remarks that quite often the dredge material that comes from places like the channel that services the Port of Baltimore can be used for beneficial purposes, including beach renourishment, which is really about protecting coastal communities from coastal storm risk. And you're correct. The project in Ocean City that you referenced, as you correctly referenced, has a 4-year replenishment cycle. The last time it was renourished was in 2022, and so that puts us on schedule for 2026. And I'll defer to General Graham about any delays or causes for delay. I'm not aware of any.
Thank you. And General, maybe you can just say whether you foresee whether a 1-year delay, what impact might that have on the overall effectiveness of the project?
The coastal storm risk management project, Senator, that we do, mainly the beach renourishment projects, we're working with Mother Nature on this, and she's awfully variable. And so we have this periodic renourishment schedule, but sometimes the beaches erode, sometimes they accrete as the storms move. So there's a lot of variables that go into that.
All right. Thank you so much. I yield. Thank you so much, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. So with no further questions, I would like to thank the witnesses and all of my colleagues for the participation in today's hearing. Senators who wish to submit written questions for the record have until 5 p.m. on Wednesday, October the 1st, to do so. The witnesses' responses to these questions are due back to the committee no later than close of business Wednesday, October 15th. And will be submitted to the record. I'm going to run out here because we're on a vote, and I don't want to hold us up on the floor. So don't take that as any reflection on my gratitude for you all coming so quickly. I know you've been in the position for a short period of time, but we want to stay close with the Corps and we want to stay close with the projects. Thank you very much. And with that, this hearing is adjourned.